Okay. Hi, I'm Nancy Graham. I'm chair of the Lebanon Democratic Committee, and we are so delighted that so many of you decided to come join us and hear Mark Morgan tell us all about recycling, especially the little numbers on the plastics that we buy. Hi, before we get started, we need to do a little bit of housekeeping. We would really like everyone to be muted until we invite you to unmute. Okay, and then if you have any comments, you can put them in the chat, but we would like you to use the raise digital hand to ask a question. And if you don't know where that is, if you look at the screen, the raised hand is on the right side of your computer, and it's at the top of your iPad. Okay, and then you just go in, raise hand, and then once you've asked your question, you can lower it. In the comments, we would prefer just if you're having trouble with technological things, or if you just want to make a comment. Lynn Garfield will be handling and calling on you for when you raise your hand. Okay. And just for fun and for practice, I want everybody that if you're one of the 130 million people who have had a COVID vaccine, I would like you to raise your hand.
Your digital hand.
Your digital hand. Your digital hand. This is practice. Your digital hand. So everybody find your digital hand. So some of you have found your it's down under reactions and you'll see it. Okay. Okay, you can lower your hands.
Okay,
now,
so I'll clear the feedback.
Okay. And now I'd like you, if you've had both shots and can go out almost normally or see friends, please raise your hands. Okay.
Again.
That's 21 hands, 5 thumbs, 2 claps, and 1 party hat. Pretty
At least
good.
we're having a good time.
Okay, I'm going to clear the feedback.
Democrats.
Right. Well, New Hampshire and Vermont are doing a really good job with doing the COVID vaccine. So we're good at something, which is
Having
great.
the vaccine doesn't mean you can almost go out normally.
No, it doesn't mean. It means you can get together with people that you know, and you can ride in a car with a friend or do something with your pod. You just still can't
Go wild and crazy.
No, can't go wild and crazy.
I know Lynn, but I'm not going to get in a car with her.
Amelia!
Okay. All right. Now it's time that we've had our fun. Now we have to get serious. And Lynn is going to introduce our speaker.
Hi, everybody. As Vice Chair of the Lebanon Democrats, I would like to thank you for joining tonight's program. We're very fortunate to have one of New Hampshire's very dedicated waste managers, Mark Morgan, here tonight to help sort through your questions regarding recycling from zero sort to self-sort processes. Mark has worked in the solid waste industry for more than 20 years. 12 years of his career have been spent at the West Lebanon landfill, which currently serves 23 towns across the Upper Valley. He has served as New Hampshire's waste site coordinator and has experience running his own consulting business. In 2019, he received the Environmental Stewardship Award from the nonprofit New Hampshire the Beautiful. Mark has done and continues to research into and teach about how we can reduce the impact of our waste habits. With that, I will turn the conversation over to Mark.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. I cannot believe there are 60 people on this right now listening to this topic. So you're either crazy like I am about garbage issues, or there's nothing on TV. So either way, I'm pretty informal. I don't have a presentation to give. I have some notes that will guide my talk, but what I'm really hoping is that we can have a conversation. What I think is important may not be what you feel is important. So if you have a thought or a question or a comment as we're going along, please, as was shown just a few moments ago, raise your hand, put something in the chat, something along those lines, and we'll get to them as we're going, if that's all right with everybody. Does that work for everybody? Perfect. Seeing lots of head nods. That's good. So what I'm going to do is just kind of give a very broad overview of waste in the Upper Valley, and then we'll drill down. Okay. So the Lebanon facility, as Lynn mentioned, does serve 23 communities. We manage about 40,000 tons of garbage here at this location. We are an active landfill here in the Upper Valley. We also operate a food scrap composting program, a household hazardous waste program, as well as a recycling program at the Lebanon Recycling Center. There are 9 people who work here managing these waste streams. And there's been, a lot of changes in the last year. I know I've received a few emails from folks today about some questions that I'll incorporate into tonight's discussion. But a lot of the thoughts and comments that I'll have this evening came out of a class that I taught recently through Osher. And I know Lynn was in that class, and maybe a few others on the call this evening might have attended that class as well. And I'm going to be doing that class again. I think it's in the fall through Osher. And the class is called Beyond the Curb, and it's Recycling 101. And we spend 8 weeks talking about waste issues. So if you want to learn more about garbage, look into Osher and attend that class. One of the things that we talked about in the class was that the concept of waste itself has changed dramatically, particularly in the last couple of decades. There was a time when waste was something that had no value. There was no purpose. You'd exhausted its use. That is no longer the case. Now, waste is something I no longer want. And for me, a great example is a smartphone. Because every 2 years, I get a new one, whether I want it or not. Generally speaking, people want a new smartphone or a new cell phone anyways. So we get new phones. But there's nothing wrong with the one I'm replacing, but it gets discarded. So it's just this notion of what's important. Another great example is fashion or clothing. In the United States, people buy an unbelievable amount of clothes every year. And the clothes, I think we could all say are pretty poor quality anyway, but they're very inexpensive. So we can buy more clothes than ever. And a lot of the clothing recyclers are not interested in clothing coming out of the United States any longer because of how poor the quality is. So those are 2 examples of how waste has changed over the years. We would have used clothes until they were so holey and patched that, they serve no purpose any longer. Now it's, I really don't want this. So waste represents something very different. Over time, we're producing less waste per person, but it's a little deceiving because the waste that we're producing actually weighs less. So a plastic water bottle is thinner than it was 10 years ago. So I may be consuming more plastic bottles now, but the weight of each bottle is now less. So my consumption has actually gone up because most of what we use nowadays is disposable. And as a result, we're throwing away far more than ever before. And I know a lot of folks have questions about plastics. And I'll be honest, plastics is something I really struggle with personally because it's actually a very small portion of our waste stream. It's about 15% of what we throw away is plastic, and that's all plastic. So by weight, it's a small portion of what we throw away, but it seems to command an enormous amount of our attention. And I think it's primarily because it's everywhere. And there's just this sense of plastic is everywhere. What do I do with this stuff? And I think that I'll just say the sad fact on the front end of plastics discussion. sometimes the most environmental thing you can do with your plastic is throw it away. Properly dispose of it in a legitimate disposal site. Very often, people will do what has been called wish cycling and just wish that this item, here, I'll just use this item, was recyclable, and whether it is or not, and we throw it in our recycling bin. As a result, what I'm doing is I'm passing on or abdicating the responsibility to the next guy or woman in the chain, and assuming that, well, I don't know if this is recyclable, but somebody else is going to know if this is recyclable. So I'm just going to throw it in my recycling bin in hopes that somebody else will make the right decision for me. The problem with that is this is creating an enormous problem in recycling markets, where a third of everything you're throwing in your recycling bin is now garbage at an enormous cost, both financially and environmentally. So in the Upper Valley, the majority of recyclables are collected at the curb in what is called zero sort or single stream recycling. And those recyclables are transported to either Rutland, Vermont, or Charlestown, Massachusetts, to be sorted by machines or people. So we've removed the responsibility of sorting out our own recyclables and given it to somebody else. But now we're also not only removing the sorting, but we're removing the thought process that even goes into, is this even recyclable? Well, I'm not sure, but I'll throw it in anyway. And as a result, we see things like turkey carcasses in recycling bins, bowling balls, garden hoses, diapers, food scraps, a whole host of things that should never be in a recycling bin, are ending up in those bins. And what happens is, I think we just assume that, well, if it's not recyclable, they'll take it out and they'll take care of it. But now it's gotten to 30% of what's in that bin is now garbage. And that needs to go someplace. We've already trucked it a long distance in hopes that it would be recyclable. And then we're trucking it even further to be disposed of ultimately. So if, let's say I'm a Lebanon resident and I throw my non-recyclable item in my recycling bin, that plastic container is going to go to Rutland, Vermont first, where it will be sorted manually by hand by individuals in Rutland, Vermont. And if it's not recyclable, it'll be thrown away in a landfill in Coventry, Vermont. But if you're a Lebanon resident, you could have thrown it away in the Lebanon landfill and you'd be done with it. And you have your transportation footprint is very small. So the environmental cost is huge because of transportation. The cost to recycle at the curb is $124 a ton on average. To dispose of something in Lebanon is $75. So do the math. To throw this out wrong is far more expensive than disposing of it correctly, where it should have been in the first place. So it's a long story, because anytime I have an opportunity to help educate people about recycling better at the curb, I'm going to take that time, because very often that's what people are doing. They'll look at their container, their plastic container. I got a few questions about this earlier. Well, there's a number on this cap. There's numbers on everything. Here's a little plastic toter thing. There's a number on this. So I should be able to recycle this. Well, no, that's not the case. Unfortunately, those containers end up in recycling bins and then contaminate recyclables and make other things that are recyclable, non-recyclable. So you can do a really good job and your neighbor does a bad job, and it can ruin the whole batch for everybody. So it's really important that you're doing it right. Which leads to the next question, which is, okay, so what's right? So what is right is very simple. Okay, the first thing you need to do is throw out the number system. Okay, throw out 1 through 7. It really doesn't matter anymore. What is important is bottles are always recyclable. Okay, so if you have a plastic water bottle, like the one I showed you, they're always recyclable. Some of the other ones that are confusing, it gets a little weedy, and we've been dealing with them since we started an app. About a week ago, we launched an app to help people determine whether something was recyclable. And you could put it on your phone and you use a little QR code reader, and it would read the there's a barcode on the backs of a lot of products, like this one right here. It'll read that code right there and tell you what this is and if it's recyclable in Lebanon. We got a few people getting pretty steamed about it because they had been recycling a particular item for a lot of years because it had a number 1 on it. Well, the app is wrong because now it's telling me that I have to throw this away. The app is not wrong. You have been recycling wrong all these years, is really the problem. So the big problem that we see frequently is they're called clamshells, and it's like spinach or other lettuce and a lot of produce are coming in these, and it's a number 1 plastic. It's clear and it's kind of crunchy, but it has a hinged lid like a clamshell. So hinged lid containers are not recyclable, even though it has a number 1 on it. So that creates a lot of confusion with people. And the reason for that is because that particular plastic melts at a lower temperature than other, this is a number 1 plastic, than this type of plastic. And because it melts at a lower temperature, it becomes a contaminant in the recycling stream and in the remanufacturing stream. So it's important that people understand that. Leanne asks, is that true of Casella Zero Sort as well? It's really hard to say because it depends on where the material is going. For us here in Lebanon, it's a contaminant because the buyer that we use, that's what they're looking for. So it's important to understand where your material is going. And by understanding that, you'll know what is or is not acceptable for recycling. Like here in Lebanon, black plastic is not accepted. In other places, it is accepted. The reason black plastic is not accepted is most plastic is optically sorted using robots, and the robots can't see the color black because the belt that the plastic is running on is black. So it can't see the color black. So the black plastic just becomes a bypass waste. So they don't even want it. Lynn, you had a question?
Unmute.
Yep. You described the clamshell plastics. There are also, I think it's the same plastic, for instance, that lettuce might come in. It doesn't actually have the hinge, but it is the same plastic. Isn't that
Yes,
correct?
It is. Yep. And so when you're using the app, people were just getting very frustrated. So like, wait a minute, it says in Lebanon, 1 through 7 plastics are acceptable, but now it's not always the case. And so that we're just trying to find that balance. The takeaway from it though is the app is right. At the end of the day, the app is actually right. And that people who have been doing something for a long time, just because you've been doing it for a long time doesn't mean that you're right. You could be doing the wrong thing very well for a long period of time and think you're recycling. Well, I put this in this bin, so it must be recyclable. I was over at the recycling center probably 6 or 8 months ago and interrupted a gentleman who was putting plastic snow fence into our plastics recycling bin. I tried to stop him and I asked what he was doing. And he goes, well, I'm putting this in the recycling bin. I said, sir, the sign says plastic bottles only. He goes, well, this is plastic, right? But it's not a bottle. And he couldn't get past the fact that it was still plastic. And because it's plastic, it should be recyclable. And maybe it is somewhere in the universe, but it's not here. Some of us don't have smartphones. Is there a picture? There are some things out there that are on the city's website that we've put on for plastics as far as what is acceptable. So the app is not the only tool that we have. You can go on the city's website, and at the end of our talk tonight, I'm going to show you how to navigate that site. We actually have a search engine on the website where you can enter in, it says, how do I get rid of, and you literally fill in this field and you can write in, soda bottles, coat hangers, bicycles, write in what it is that you're trying to get rid of. And then it'll tell you how to get rid of that. Any other common things? How many other common things we think are recyclable or not recyclable? That's a really enormous question. The biggest confusion is plastic. So there's two things to remember with plastic, and it's just this easy. Bottles are always recyclable, and you can't recycle anything smaller than a Lego man. Those are the two things to remember with plastics recycling. Because some folks will try to recycle things like eye drop bottles. Those are not recyclable because they're too small, and they actually slide through different mechanical screens in a sort facility. Smaller than what, David Kotz says? Smaller than a Lego man. So 2 inches. So I don't have anything that size, but probably a business card. Anything smaller than 2 inches is not recyclable. Okay, even if it's made of something that's very recyclable, because the way that we sort recyclables in factories now, it falls through the machinery and just it causes other problems. Some other common recycling mistakes that people make that we see here are grocery bags and film plastic. Those items are recyclable, but not here in our plastics bin here. Those can be brought back to your grocery stores and some retail stores for recycling. Many of them, well, Shaw's, Hannaford's, and Price Chopper all use the same plastics recycler for their film plastic. So all 3 of those stores send their plastic to the same place, even though their signage might be slightly different. So you can put, film plastic bread bags, like if it's raining and you get the newspaper delivered, that orange film plastic bag that the paper comes in, that can go in there. Dry cleaner bags, that your clothes come in after they come back from the dry cleaners. Those types of plastics can also go into the film plastic recycling at the grocery stores. One that we discovered recently is black flower pots are actually accepted for recycling at Home Depot. So Home Depot will take black plastic flower pots and trays, and those go to a facility that we looked into. I think it's in Michigan, and they actually use the flower pots to make new flower pots. So it's a closed loop recycling system that's domestic right here in the US. And you can access it at no charge at Home Depot. You just bring them to the customer service desk and you say, I want to recycle my flower pots. Beth asks, what about Amazon bags in film recycling? So those can be challenging. It'll say right on it, it's acceptable at certain locations, but it'll tell you you've got to cut the label off. There's other stuff you've got to do. So if you're willing to get it so it's just the film plastic, that's okay. But those are the ones that are completely plastic. Some folks confuse the ones that are like a paper envelope on the outside and bubble wrap on the inside. Those are called composite products. Those products always go in the garbage. There's no way to separate those effectively. So an overview of plastic to-go containers that are recyclable. Realistically, most things that are to-go containers are not going to be recyclable. Many of them are composite plastics or styrofoam. There are some restaurants in the Upper Valley. One that comes to mind is Marsh Brothers on School Street. They use compostable to-go containers. So if you do to-go containers and you use a particular restaurant frequently, you might want to ask them to use compostable. The lids on to-go coffee cups are plastic. They are never recyclable. This is Stump the Chump. I like this. What do you do with shredded paper? Okay, so shredded paper, you can do two things. Bring it here and just dump it in the mixed paper bin. Or if you have a backyard composting bin, you can compost food scraps with your shredded paper. Or if you're really clever, you can do a worm bin and use shredded paper. Amazon boxes covered in tape is not a big deal. Don't worry about that. Just leave the tape on and step away from the box. It'll be okay. The way paper is recycled involves a lot of chemicals and heat. So the plastic is actually melted off either through heat or a chemical process. And then it goes off as waste. So not a big deal. And yes, Lucky's does use compostables for most of their to-go containers as well. There are a number of local restaurants that are offering that service. Unopened junk mail is asked. What I would recommend is going online and just figuring out how do you get off of unwanted junk mail lists. One way to not get on them is like when you go to some of the local stores, they give you these little plastic tabby things to put on your keychain. What you're doing there is you're selling your personal information in exchange for a cheaper priced product. And every time that happens, that information is sold to junk mail companies who learn what you're buying and then will send you all sorts of goodies in the mail. So you can stop using those. And second, get your name off of these junk mail lists. There are areas on the internet where you can register or deregister your address. Okay, so, but where do we compost our compostable takeout containers? Funny you should ask. You can do that right here. In January, we started a food scrap program here at the Lebanon Solid Waste Facility, and it costs one punch card for the entire year. So you go onto our website or come here to the scale house, fill out an application, hand over one full punch card. We will give you a permit that you stick on a 5-gallon pail of your choosing and put compostable bags in the pail, fill it up with food scraps during the week and bring it in and we'll compost that for you. And it does include compostable products. So some of the other things that we can compost here are things like lobster shells, clam shells. We can compost chicken, turkey carcasses, meat bones, fish, dairy, all sorts of things we're able to compost here. So our food scrap program is on our website. And again, I'll show you that in a bit as far as how that works. Again, I'm just reading through some of the chat. Yes, LaValley's does sell the bags for the buckets. Also, West Leb Feed and Supply has set up a compost bin setup that you could go there and you could purchase a pail with a screw top lid as well as bags. So there's a number of local companies that have taken advantage of that.
Mark, there was a question, does non-recyclable plastic go to the landfill or do you have an incinerators for it?
So all of the waste that you dispose of in your garbage does come here to the Lebanon landfill. We do not have an incinerator. There's only one incinerator in all of New Hampshire. There's none in Vermont. I think there's 2 or 3 in Maine, but there's only one here in New Hampshire, and that's in Pennacook. It's a long way from here.
Okay, Martha Hennessy says, are you going to talk about why we can't recycle glass anymore?
Well, that's not a true statement.
Okay.
Here, we actually recycle glass in 2 forms. So for some of you, recent curbside programs removed glass from it. I found out recently that Casella is actually trucking their glass to Georgia by rail. So you can recycle your glass right here in Lebanon, and it's a much shorter drive. Again, the environmental footprint associated with transportation is unbelievable when you start looking at your waste. So we recycle glass as an aggregate and use it in construction material here in the landfill. But we also ship glass to Canada, to a Owens Corning plant where they make fiberglass insulation. So there are no glass-to-glass recyclers in the Northeast. The last one closed about 3 years ago. So there are glass options available, but very few, if any, at the curb. All right, what about glass bottles that have plastic or metal rings still on them? It's okay. Staples are okay, paper clips are okay, all of those things are okay. Much of what we do now for sorting is very mechanized, so it's okay. You don't have to, the purity isn't required anymore. Some people ask me, this question I get frequently is, do I need to rinse out my containers? And my next question, I answer it with a question, and that is, do you like your recycler? And the reason for that is because if you don't rinse it out, it's going to stink. So if you don't like your recycler, then you don't care if it stinks. But if you would like your recycler to stick around and do a good job, then maybe you do want to rinse it out, because some of those bottles, milk jugs, the worst thing is bad peanut butter. Bad
Oh.
peanut butter is awful. So, rinse things out. They don't have to be absolutely clean, but rinse things out. The recycling process, like I mentioned earlier, is chemicals and heat. So a lot of the food residuals are going to get burnt off. You don't have to take the paper labels off your tomato cans unless you want to, and put the paper in the paper bin and all that. I mean, you're welcome to do that stuff, but it's not necessary.
Mark, there's another question. Why is Lebanon still able to continue taking plastics when so many smaller communities have stopped recycling?
Okay, that's a very easy question. And my answer is very simple, because Lebanon is better. We've been very successful at developing and holding on to markets. We have worked really hard at developing relationships with our buyers. I've used the same plastics recycler for over 15 years. They're located in Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And they take our plastics, and we don't get the best price, but when the market is bad, they buy our plastics. We have never had a situation where we couldn't move material. And it's because when the market is good, we continue to move our material through them at a lower price and honor that relationship. So we just have a very different way of managing our waste streams, and been very successful in doing so. Last year during COVID, our revenue was actually up almost 15% in a year where people were struggling to move recyclables. We had one of the best years we've had in years. So Steve Campbell says the number system for plastics was made easy for consumers. If the number system is broken, it needs to be fixed. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of talk on the national level about instituting new consumer product guidelines where a plastic bottle has to have the same resin type cap as the bottle, as the label, instead of having 3 or 4 different types of plastic in them. Can you take bags that are similar to the pellet bags? We can, but we don't advertise it. And the reason I don't is because it's another example of people recycling badly. Pellet bags are really obvious, but people somehow confuse pellet bags with grain bags, which are a woven type plastic, and it's not the same type of plastic. They just see plastic bag, it goes here, and it's not the same. So there are areas where it seems like we're being bizarrely militant, and it's just because it's difficult to move some of these products. So to keep them clean is really important. Okay, do you mulch Christmas trees? Yes, we do. And what do you do with the compost? So we actually produce about 20,000 cubic yards of compost here a year. And we produce 2 types of compost. One is food scrap compost, and one is yard waste compost. The yard waste compost last year, we moved about 15,000 yards to Lebanon's cemeteries, parks, and athletic fields for the first time. About 2 years ago, we started a soil program to better understand the soils in our public spaces, and we've replaced chemicals with compost. The food scrap compost that we produce here, we use on outside slopes of the landfill for erosion control. The state requires us to put topsoil down, but instead of purchasing topsoil off of farm fields, what we do is we manufacture topsoil out of waste products and use it on outside slopes. So we're diverting waste, saving money, and farmlands. Judith asks, when a product comes in glass or plastic, I assume glass is better. Not always. And I will give an example of that. There is a product locally that is produced locally, and they use glass bottles. Those glass bottles actually come from Germany because of the particular nature of the product requires a very special glass. So we have this apple pie vision of glass, but sometimes that glass came from a very long distance to get to where we are. And then if you throw that glass into your curbside recycling bin, Casella picks it up and then trucks it all the way to Georgia. That's a lot of transportation for that glass bottle. I'm not advocating for plastic. My point is, it's not as simple as glass is better than plastic. A lot of plastic is manufactured domestically and can be recycled domestically. So again, that transportation network, or footprint rather, is very small when compared to things like glass. Glass return programs like McNamara Dairy, I find it appalling when I see glass McNamara bottles in our glass recycling bin, because people are just frankly too lazy to bring it back to the store. So a glass return program trumps plastic all day long. It just makes so much sense, but we're getting lazy. And you can see it at Hannaford's when you go to buy McNamara milk, because they're replacing it with plastic. And they're doing that because their customers are moving in that direction. They would much rather use glass.
Okay, there's a question. I recently noticed that Hartford can take alkaline batteries for recycling. Is there anywhere Leb residents can recycle them?
Not in Lebanon. I don't know where Hartford's taking their alkaline batteries. I would ask. There's only one alkaline battery recycler in the entire country, and it's a very unstable market, and it's extremely expensive. What I tell people is, don't use alkaline batteries, buy rechargeables, and rechargeable batteries are recyclable all day long. So stop using single-use disposable batteries, and you'll be in a better position. I see Beth McKinnon has her hand up, and your mute button is on. All right, well.
Beth, you need to unmute yourself. Where'd she go?
Maybe she didn't, maybe her hand was up from earlier.
Oh, well, here we go. Beth, do you have a question?
No, sorry, that my hand was up from one of the earlier questions. I'm okay.
okay.
Thank you.
No problem, thank you. So I just gonna touch on a couple of other topics, and then I'd like to spend a few minutes just showing you how to navigate the city's website. Something that's come up a few times is the impacts of COVID-19 on the waste stream. Here in Lebanon, the waste stream actually dropped 17% in the first year. The reason for that, it's kind of, people find it confusing because they were like, well, I felt like I was generating more waste because I was working from home, or I cleaned out the garage, things of that nature. Homeowners' trash really didn't go up a whole lot. What changed was we stopped going out to dinner. We stopped going to the movie theater. Dartmouth College sent their students home. No more elective surgeries at DHMC or APD, which had an enormous impact on the waste stream. The amount of personal protective equipment that is being generated is enormous, but it's certainly not what people think it is. You know, it's not thousands and thousands of tons, at least up here. It's generally just very bulky, light material. So it's not outlandish, you know, and protecting public health, I think is a more critical and important issue in that regard. As we move through COVID-19, we're seeing some changes in the way that recyclables are being sorted. I mentioned earlier robots and optical sorts. Those are happening more often just because of labor shortages and trouble finding people who are willing to manually sort our waste. So they're taking advantage of robots and other artificial intelligence. Lynn, you had a question?
Well, Carol Weingeist, and she's trying to come in, has a question about the plastic bags that frozen vegetables come in.
Yep. So some of those, if they are like the like bread bags and things of that nature, yes, they can be recycled with film plastic. So again, it's not, those are not items you're going to put in the curb. you're going to bring those to your local grocery store. You really should rinse those out and put them in a recycling bin. Yes,
So
Lynn.
these are not the clear bags that a newspaper comes in or
Correct.
bread comes in. They're opaque.
Yeah, it might be like frozen peas, a bag of
Yes.
frozen peas or something
Yeah.
like that. Yep, those would be a film type plastic that could go
Excellent.
into that
Okay.
container.
Great,
Okay.
thanks.
What could be done on the state level to help out municipalities like Lebanon? I've spoken at least a half a dozen times in the last year at the state level, supporting legislation. So what could be, it's amazing, is as irritating and frustrating as these Zoom meetings can be, it's actually improved, in some cases, the democratic process, because it's allowed access to our legislators that we've never had before. There's a ton of committees that are out there. There's at least a dozen bills in the House and Senate right now on a variety of issues. Some of them appear to be fairly mundane and boring, but it's how the whole process works. Like there's a study committee that I've been participating in as far as how to better plan for solid waste in New Hampshire as it relates to other states. About 50% of the waste disposed of in New Hampshire came from outside New Hampshire. So out-of-state waste is filling New Hampshire's landfills. But there's constitutional law that does not allow us to restrict interstate commerce, and waste is interstate commerce. So it's very complicated, but I would encourage all of you, to seek out your representatives and ask, what bills are out there, what's the schedule, and you can participate. You can comment as an individual from the public, either for or against a particular bill. That, it's amazing what this technology is allowing. So Sarah asks, at the outset, you mentioned that plastic is not your biggest concern because by weight is just a fraction of our waste. What are your biggest concerns about what we are putting in the landfill? And is recycling the solution or reducing? I'm thinking mattresses, shoes, textiles, what else? So Sarah asks a very pointed and good question. Plastics improperly disposed of is a problem. My biggest concerns, we continue to throw paper and cardboard in the garbage, along with food scraps. I cannot believe a country like this, with people who are still suffering from food insecurity, and we throw away. What we calculated is here in Lebanon, about 15% of what we throw away is food scraps. And I call it food scraps, not food waste, because it's an unintended and unnecessary waste product completely. So for me, food scraps are one of the biggest issues going. It's something that could be easily addressed, by just shopping better. Yes, the whole food system is a little bit broken, but those are the issues for me. Those are so easy. Paper and cardboard and food scraps can all be managed through diversion locally. They don't have to be shipped overseas, and that represents half of our garbage, those three items. She asks about, is recycling the solution? I actually don't think recycling is the solution. I think recycling has allowed us to make poor choices and feel good about them. An example is bottled water. This month, we're celebrating Refill Not Landfill Month. And our focus this year is bottled water. The reason I mentioned bottled water is we feel comfortable drinking bottled water because it comes in a bottle that's recyclable. So I feel comfortable consuming this single-use disposable product because I can still recycle it. When there's a better choice, refill your mug or your travel jug or whatever it is. So reusing is definitely the better choice. Recycling is part of the solution, but unfortunately it becomes so focused for all of us to be the solution. I want to recycle my plastic more. I want to recycle when we should be asking ourselves, did I need this in the first place? Is there some other way that I could be consuming this product without this much plastic or this much single-use disposable? The example of the alkaline battery and the rechargeable batteries. rechargeable batteries work just as well, and they're recyclable. They produce less waste. So that's my soapbox. She was asking about mattresses, shoes, textiles, what else? Those are very difficult items to recycle. I think it comes down to, sometimes if you buy a cheap something, you get a cheap something and it lasts not very long and you end up discarding it anyway. So sometimes paying a little bit more, you get a better product and less waste. Jane Hooper asks, do you think New Hampshire will ever get a returnable bottle bill? Honestly, no. New Hampshire's been trying for over 40 years to pass a bottle bill. And for some reason, because our neighbors do it, New Hampshire won't. So that's my 2 cents on the bottle bill. What happens to things that are not recyclable but are put in the curbside recycling bins? As I mentioned earlier, a lot of them are sorted out and end up in the garbage anyway, and often, unfortunately, actually contaminate other good recyclables. If you were to take a mug or something with liquid, throw it in the bin, or a soda bottle half consumed, throw it in the bin. Well, it's got the cap on. Well, those trucks are under pressure when they squeeze the recyclables in, can break those bottles open. All that soda goes all over other paper. That paper that was recyclable is now wet and is no longer recyclable. So somebody, no bad intentions, but instead of just emptying the contents of that container, has ruined what would have been decent recyclables. Where do you get recyclable batteries now? Rechargeable batteries are at most stores, Home Depot and places like that. Bottle recycling rates higher in neighboring states that have bottle bills. It's very strange. Curbside recycling has thrown off a lot of bottle bill states because people are putting stuff at the curb. A nickel per can is not enough anymore. Are beverages purchased in aluminum cans inherently preferable than buying the same beverage in a plastic bottle? There is a movement right now towards aluminum bottles and more aluminum cans, touting an environmental benefit. Again, you just got to ask yourself, do I need this? Is there a better way? I don't want to say that aluminum is better than plastic. Sometimes it is and sometimes it's not. Okay, some things like alkaline batteries sometimes come packaged. Yes, if you're buying something and your remote control comes with a single-use disposable alkaline battery, you're kind of stuck with it. So is there a good way to get companies engaged in a conversation? Many of these companies aren't even in the United States, so it's very difficult to communicate with them. Are paper face masks recyclable? I'm not aware of paper face masks, but I will say that I'm not aware of any face masks that are recyclable. Maybe that's the easier answer.
No, it's the face mask used by healthcare workers.
Those are not paper. It's a paper plastic composite.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks,
Okay.
Virginia. Plastic soda cups and lids, yogurt tubs and lids. I think I'll just answer this question very easily. Lids comes up a lot, throw them away. Just throw the lids away. You look at the number, well, it's a 5, it's a 4. Mark said those are recyclable. No, if it's a lid, throw it away. Because chances are it's smaller than 2 inches in one direction or another. Remember the Lego man? So it'll end up in a screen, end up in the garbage anyway. So just keep the lids off and then it's not a problem. All right, I've got 10 minutes left. I want to respect your time. So I am going to attempt to share my screen. Can I share?
Should be able to.
Okay. Just trying to see where the share.
At the bottom, the green square.
You're absolutely right. Thank you. All right. can you
Mark,
see my
Mark,
screen?
just a
What's that?
quickie. Yogurt tubs are recyclable, correct?
Yogurt tubs are recyclable, yes.
Just not the lids. Thanks.
Correct. Yep. All right. So this is the City of Lebanon's website. Can everybody see that?
Looks great.
Okay. So this is LebanonNH.gov. Scroll down the page. I just want to point out that the #2 topic on the City of Lebanon website is solid waste and recycling. just behind taxes. So we are the second most popular item searched. So under current Leb news, right here in the middle, we've got two items. One is the new app. It's a web-based app. You're not going to find it on Google Play or Apple, whatever. The other issue that we have on here is the pledge to refill, not landfill. So these are just links that you would go to. You can pledge to refill, not landfill for the month of April, or go to the Lebanon Solid Waste app page, and it'll tell you how to launch that app for you. On our solid waste and recycling page, we have, this is the what goes where. And again, all you got to do, it does talk about the app at the top, but you can put in bottle and it'll tell you plastic bottles and here's how you do it. Glass bottles, here's how you do it. So you can just type in different things. Okay, so you can just type in whatever you want in this little search bar. So there's a lot of resources on that page. I would encourage you guys to check it out. You can always call or talk to somebody here, but we try to encourage people to go there first because we get a lot of phone calls and emails every day regarding information that's already on there. We've got information on there about how to dispose of invasive plants. There's a whole host of issues that are on there that over the years we've just put up. We're currently working on, actually there's one right there. We do have a new page on here called Common Recycling Contaminants. And one of the guys that's working for me, his name is Matt Grossman, and he's been, kind of experimenting with the web page. Actually, I'll show you guys this page. So this is a common recycling contaminants. And what Matt's doing is he's pulling stuff out of the recycling bins. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily mean that the item's not recyclable. It might just be in the wrong bin. These were all items found in the plastic recycling bin. They're all recyclable, but they're not in the right bin. So we're starting to put this stuff together. Here are examples of plastics that we find in the plastic bin that are not recyclable. Again, more items. And a lot of them are recyclable, they're just not in the right bin. And it causes a problem for us when we go to try to market these plastics. Good job, Matt. All right, in the remaining few moments, I'd be happy to open it up to some questions. I'm seeing a few on the chat. Aluminum foil is completely recyclable with our aluminum cans, along with aluminum pie plates and aluminum cat food cans. My conditioner comes in a squeeze bottle with a tiny hole like a hand cream. That is not recyclable. Super excited about the app. Is there a reason it is web-based? It's web-based because that's the future of apps. The web-based app allows you to have it on either Apple or an Android platform without any crossover issues. So it's internet-based. It gives you that flexibility. I've been ripping out the little plastic windows. Savannah, stop doing that. There's no need to do that anymore. Leave the plastic windows in, okay? How about the plastic part of a Kleenex box? Again, Susan, leave it, it's okay. I watched Casella's videos last year. I think they said to put the caps on the bottles. They did. I've heard this so many times about caps and lids. They're not generally recyclable. So all I'm trying to do is they can tell you to throw it in the bin and then it's going to get tossed out in the landfill anyway. All I'm saying is it's not going to get recycled at that end anyway. Just throw it in the garbage and save a step. Any other questions? Ooh, can we crush milk bottles? I bet you can, and it's okay. You don't have to, it's not necessary. Same with cardboard boxes. People come in and stomp all over them. It's not necessary. We put it in a big machine that crushes it. So it's not necessary. Incandescent bulbs should go in the glass. No. Light bulbs go in the garbage. Fluorescent lamps get recycled. Incandescent lamps are not recyclable. Please don't throw them in the glass bin. So here in Lebanon, black plastic is trash. Is anyone working on getting our restaurants to stop using black plastic? There are a few that are trying. I think it's just a function of what's available out there and what people are willing to accept. I think we can all vote with our wallets and our feet. And if it's something you feel strongly about, patron someplace else. I think at some point we've got to stand up and say no. All right, we're just a couple minutes from 8, and I want to thank everybody for their time tonight. Really appreciate the opportunity. It was great working with Lynn and the rest. Again, if this is an issue that you guys are excited about or want to learn more, talk to Lynn Garfield. She attended the OSHA class and she loved it.
Yes, and this
A
will be
little too much,
available on
Mark. I don't know. Sorry.
A little too much?
I don't know.
Yeah, she's super about it. This has been recorded, so we can send the recordings out to you. We're going to try to have it put on the Upper Valley Dems webpage, but I can certainly send it to anybody that would want it. So,
Nancy, can you send me a copy? We'll post it on the city website.
okay,
Excellent.
that's great. Somebody asked about that and I didn't know whether that was possible. Okay.
Yeah, we've
we
done
will
that with other
definitely-
trainings. Yep,
Okay, we will definitely send it to you.
perfect. I appreciate it. And we'll post it on the solid waste webpage.
Okay. Okay, if there are no more questions for Mark, we would like to thank everybody for coming tonight, and we look forward to having you come to future Upper Valley Democrat Lebanon Dems presentations.
Thanks,
And
Mark.
thank you, Mark.
Thank
Woo!
you, Mark.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks a lot,
Bye.
Mark.
Good night.
Night.